In the meantime, one of the things we're finding out from these candidates and those who are already in the House, including those who want to get into the House themselves, including my next guest, not too keen on what the president is saying, that he'll stick in the race. Adam Frisch is a Colorado Congressional District 3 candidate, joins us right now. Mr. Frisch, very good to have you. So you're not keen on the president sticking this out. Why not?
No, good morning. Happy 4th of July weekend. Proud to be American for all of us, Neil. Listen, I don't spend a lot of time talking to people in D.C., but when I listen to steelworkers and Pueblo farmers and ranchers in the San Luis Valley, energy producers on the western slope of our district here, they're frustrated. I think it made it worse last night, with all due respect to the president. I'm not jumping for joy having these conversations with people, but there is obviously another...
I'm sorry, sir. What unnerved you about it that made you feel, more confident in your conviction he should step down?
Listen, there's some denialism there, and I'm hearing this again from all these people on the ground, not from people in D.C. But again, my focus has always been not so much on the president or either president. I prefer that both parties find new leadership. I appreciate that's not going to happen in some places, but I think it's really, really important for the sake of the country, for the president to withdraw from the race with due respect and try to figure out how we get new generational leadership in both parties. And that's what I'm hearing, again, from Southern Colorado and Western Colorado. And it's really, really frustrating to continue to hear what I'm hearing from the men and the women I've driven 57,000 miles around for the past couple of years, and what I'm hearing out of D.C. that seems to be pretty darn insular.
I've raised this issue with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Mr. Frisch, who says this is bigger than just how the president is behaving in a debate. I want you to respond to this. What do you make of all of this?
I think, what happened the other night at the debate was that a lot of Americans finally understood what the media has been hiding, what people around in the White House has been hiding, which is the executive of our country is probably not running our country, that he has cognitive issues. Jean-Pierre said was that he had a bad 90 minutes, and which is, anybody can have a bad 90 minutes. But if that's true, then he needs to dispel that very aggressively, not just with a single interview.
What do you make of that? What he's saying, is what the president's been saying. I had a bad 90 minutes. The debate was a disaster. He acknowledged that, but don't let it wipe out 3.5 years of success. That's what the president is saying. You heard what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said. That's not enough. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, what I'm hearing from Democrats, Independents, Republicans over the past couple hundred miles I've driven that were pre-planned since the debate is they're very, very frustrated. And yes, of course, it was a horrible night, just a bad night, but it seems to be an indicator of what's been going on over the past many, many months. And I think people feel frustrated. And again, it just goes back to they want a new generation of leadership to make sure that our country can go forward. And I'm not really focused on who's going to be on the ticket. I'm focused on the ranchers and the farmers and the small business owners in our district. And that's how we've been able to build what I call a pro-normal party coalition. And that's what I'm focused on. I am a dad and a husband, small business owner, American. I don't have a lot of time left over or a lot of space left over for partisanship.
There are many in your party, sir, are thinking that they've been hiding a lot of this, that they are well aware, including those at the White House who were quite aware of the president's cognitive issues, that they came glaringly to light for virtually all Americans, anyone watching that debate in the world. Do you think there's any culpability on their part that they are propping him up?
Yes, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to play one literally on television, but I can just say that there's a lot of frustration that over the past many, many months, there's been a lot of hiding. That's what I'm hearing, again, from the people on the ground I'm talking to. And these are not DC insiders. These are people that somewhat pay attention or prefer not to pay attention, because I can guarantee, Neil, so many people are just exhausted with the national political conversation. And there's been this cynicism for a long time. I mean, I believe rightly so, with due respect. A lot of Republicans should be getting grief for saying one thing privately and one thing publicly. And now you see a lot of Democrats doing the same thing with respect. And this is not I'm all for bipartisanship, but this is certainly not the type of bipartisanship I was hoping to see in D.C., where both parties are saying one thing privately and one thing publicly about their candidates for president. And that's why I believe we need a new generation of leaders on both sides. But this is the conversation we're having right now.
Should the conversation include Kamala Harris as a backup? At least she could argue she's his running mate, she's his vice president, she's a lot younger, and that if the party is going to turn to anybody, it should be her. What do you think?
I only have one comment to be said about what is next. And I believe what should have happened a year and a half ago should happen now, and there should be some type of an open primary. I don't like monopolizations in business or in politics. We need to figure out a way to have a robust, spirited, and now much shorter than ideal, but it's still better to have an open primary.
You mean an open convention, is that?
An open primary and open convention. You know, there's still X amount of weeks before the convention.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure when the convention is, but there's still a process that can happen in the type of primary where we could have debates and town halls. That's what I'm hearing people want. And then the convention is another part of that. I have no idea how those rules are written. I don't really want to get into that. But all I can say is that if the vice president would like to be part of that conversation, that's great. There's a bunch of other people that we all have been talking about, 5 or 10, 15 other people. Again, I'm pro-democracy, pro-choice, pro-competition.
All right, so when the
including
president,
in politics.
I understand, when the president comes back and says, I won this thing, me and my vice president won this thing, we amassed the delegates, it is what it is, you can't just take that away and let a 90-minute debate spoil 3.5 years of success. That is his approach. How do you respond to that?
Well, it wasn't just a one-off of 90 minutes. And again, with all due respect to the president, he and his team keep on looking backwards. And everyone I'm talking to wants to go forwards. They're trying to figure out how to make sure that the cost of living comes under control. They're trying to figure out how to humanely secure the border. And especially in Western and Southern Colorado, here we're trying to figure out how to tackle a mental health crisis. And we're trying to figure out how our water gets protected in Western and Southern Colorado. And we need to go forward. Elections are about going forward and setting a course that everyone can believe in. And that's not what I'm hearing from the president's campaign. And that's why, again, we need a new generation of leadership.
All right, we'll watch it very closely. Adam Frisch, thank you for taking the time. We'll keep in touch with you.
Have a great Saturday, Neil. Thanks so much.
All right, Adam Frisch.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.